Welcome back, everybody, to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am here with Larimer County District Attorney Gordon McLaughlin. Gordon, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I've wanted to do this for a while. I appreciate you agreeing to this. And, we'll start here. I was driving by this building yesterday. We're sitting in your office right now. And I was with a buyer from Durango. He's looking to move to Fort Collins. And I just mentioned, I said, tomorrow I'm going to interview the DA. And he said, what does the DA do all day? And I thought, well, what a great question. You could answer it a lot better than me. The answer is a lot of things, but let's just start by talking about what you do and what a normal day looks like if there is such a thing.
Yeah. So I'm the district attorney for the 8th Judicial District, which is Larimer County and all of Jackson County. And so folks usually know Jackson as North Park or Walden, just the way sort of a lot of Fort Collins folks get to Steamboat, but it's a 2-county district. So obviously the vast majority of our population and work is here in Larimer. But we do have 2 counties, and I'm the chief law enforcement officer for the 8th Judicial District. So for both of those counties, which means that the ultimate decision on how to proceed with the criminal case is up to us at the DA's office. And we prosecute about 12,000 cases a year here at the 8th Judicial District. And that ranges from everything from speeding to homicide. So pretty much every case in Larimer County comes to our office. There's a few very minor things that might be municipal violations in Fort Collins or Loveland, and then a few really major things that might go to like the U.S. attorney if they're crossing state lines and that sort of thing. But pretty much all crime is coming to the DA's office. And then it's up to us to decide what a fair and just way to proceed on that case is. And so we can do absolutely everything from dismiss a case to prosecute a case at trial and ask for a maximum sentence and everything in between. And we might get into what some of those options are that we've been working on here. But our goal is, my mandate is, how do we keep the community safe? And so we look at every single case uniquely. We look at every defendant uniquely, every victim uniquely, and see what's in the best interest of the community. So that's my ultimate goal, is serving the community. We represent all 370,000 people on Larimer County on each case. And that's true even when there's a victim. We work really closely with that victims. We have a really robust victim services department here. And so making sure we're supporting victims through a case and hearing their opinions is really essential. But ultimately, again, my boss is all 370,000 people in Larimer County. And so we're looking at justice from that broad community perspective.
Wow. And what comes to mind when you're saying this is that you're very hardworking, and that's clear. Everyone that knows you says that, by the way. We'll get to what some of our mutual acquaintances say about you.
The segment I'm afraid about, so we'll see.
We'll get there in a little bit. But very hardworking, but that just seems like a lot. So many cases have to be coming your way. How do you balance that workload?
Yeah, well, we have 42 attorneys in this office, so we're the largest law firm in Northern Colorado, and there's a lot of folks working really hard on a lot of these cases. We might have a case that comes in that's a DUI, and it has a breath result, and it's pretty simple, and the person wants to take accountability, and that can be resolved pretty quickly. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a sexual assault or a homicide or a felony domestic violence case or a fentanyl overdose causing death case that might have thousands of pages of discovery, but discovery being, police reports. It might have hundreds of hours of video, dozens of expert reports, hundreds of witnesses, and multiple agencies involved in investigating it. And so, and if something like that proceeds to preliminary hearing, motions practice, trial, that can take hundreds and hundreds of hours from the attorney, but also all the staff that supports them here. So I mentioned our victim witness unit. We also have an investigations unit that's helping to work on those crimes while they're with our office. We have staff that are managing that discovery system, because we have to provide all that discovery to defense counsel. And again, with all the digital media, that's a huge load. We have legal staff that are helping manage those files, get those motions filed, support the attorneys in court. So it's really a team effort here getting those things done. But we have people assigned to different units. And so, for instance, we have a county court unit that handles misdemeanors. We have a juvenile unit handling crimes committed by those less than 18. We have a special victims unit handling sexual assaults. We just created the domestic violence unit. So different people have different responsibilities within the office.
Yeah, walking in here today, I think I mentioned to you, it's intimidating it's just a big place. There's clearly so much going on, very professional atmosphere, and it is, without question, it's quite the operation. So yeah, I mean, that's a lot. And how'd you end up in this position? How did you get here? Let's talk a little bit about that, because we'll take maybe start at the beginning. I mean, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I always wanted to get involved in public service. I was really passionate about trying to give back in some way. My family has been involved in public service in really sort of various aspects that allowed me to see a lot of that. My grandparents, my grandfather, after getting out of World War II, joined the State Department, and he was in the Foreign Service for his whole career, and was stationed in India for a long time. And so representing, his country abroad. And while there, my grandmother worked really closely with Mother Teresa, and so volunteered in orphanages and food banks and so forth across India, mainly in Calcutta. Actually, over there, those pictures you can see on the right-hand side there, those are my grandparents with Mother Teresa and some other people in India.
Wow.
And so that's really influential. My grandma on the other side was a secretary for the New York State Police for 30 years. And that's also over there somewhere. I can't really see it from where I'm sitting, but you might be able to. Mm-hmm. That's her sort of service award from the New York State Police. Wow. So, I learned about, representing country, sticking up for those that don't have as much as the rest of us, right? The folks my grandma was working with in India have about as little as anyone in the world. And that's important to remember in the criminal justice system, that a lot of folks are coming into our system, both defendants and victims, without anywhere near the opportunities that we may have had. And so that's really important when all my folks are looking at a case and exercising the enormous discretion and power that I described we have in this office in terms of what is a just result, is sort of looking at some of those life circumstances that brought someone to the criminal justice system.
Right.
And then my mom, I wore this breast cancer awareness bracelet because my mom founded a breast cancer awareness nonprofit back where I grew up. That's now a cancer resource center.
Where was that? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the Finger Lakes region in New York, so Western New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I went to law school and knew I wanted to get in public service. I did the criminal defense clinic at the University of Colorado, where I represented indigent clients in the Boulder County system. So essentially sort of like public defender type work for those that could not afford representation. And I also interned for a district attorney's office. And
pause there. What age did you get started in this then? I mean, this seems like this was like your life goal from the start. There wasn't, I started here, went there. I mean, it seems like this was something that you wanted to do from a very young age. So how old were you when you got started?
When I went to law school?
Well, let's start after law school. Let's start right after law school.
Well, so those experiences were in law school.
Okay, got it. So you were doing that concurrently.
I did those, in law school internships, and they're both incredibly important jobs, right? We need strong, ethical public defenders. We need strong, ethical district attorneys. A functioning, well-represented criminal justice system is important not just to community safety and justice and equity, but to the sort of foundations of our democracy, making sure that everyone's treated fairly and everyone has those opportunities. I chose to be a prosecutor because of sort of what we started talking about earlier. A defense attorney is in charge of representing one client and one client's interests in each case. And those interests might often be contrary to community interests, to victim interests. And that's their job. They need to do that. But as the district attorney, the privilege of this job is I represent absolutely every single person in this community on every single case. And that's a really great way to wake up and come into work, to know that you're going to be doing your best for that community. And so that's why I chose to be a prosecutor. I then started my career in Eagle County, so the 5th Judicial District, up in the mountains, and loved practicing up there. And then eventually moved down here to Fort Collins, and I've been in this office ever since in other roles before becoming the elected DA.
So this was the goal. This was the goal from undergrad to law school to the internships that you did concurrently with your schooling to your first job getting out. I mean, this is kind of always what you wanted to do. Would that be fair to say? Yeah,
I don't know. I didn't know I always wanted to be an elected district attorney.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, difficulties with being an elected official, right? That pull you in different directions than they did as a deputy district attorney in a courtroom, just working with victims and arguing cases all day.
Sure.
So that's what drew me to the job was that work in the trenches. But then I saw, hey, if I wanted to make bigger change, I had to have the top role, because going back to your question, what I do, it's setting the philosophy and the standards for the rest of the office, for all those other 42 attorneys, for all that staff, and setting expectations about what should be occurring on these cases and what justice looks like in Larimer County.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot outside of this, and it lights you up, and it's fun to see that it lights you up. What do you like the most about it every day? Clearly you take, it very seriously that you're representing 370,000 people, but what about the day to day kind of lights you up? What do you like the most about this job?
Well, there's always a new problem to solve. I think, it's never the same, each day. We've worked on a lot of new issues over my first 4 years here. One of them that's an unfortunate but good example of just how quickly the community and criminal justice change is how we've dealt with fentanyl. Back in 2019, when I first declared to run for DA, fentanyl was a trickle. And now, as we sit here this year, last year, fentanyl is a tidal wave. For those that don't know that are listening, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's usually sold as a little blue pill that mimics a prescription pill. And it is far more addictive and lethal than prior iterations of the opioid epidemic. And so therefore incredibly, incredibly dangerous, and has killed a lot of people in our community across the country. And so things like that keep changing, and we have to adapt to what we're going to do about those. And we've adapted in a couple ways with fentanyl. One is how we're dealing with drug users. And that goes back to understanding the life circumstances that have brought someone into the system, and that drug use. Now when I go out in the community and talk about drug use, often I'll say, hey, let's see a show of hands who has a friend or family member that struggled with drugs or alcohol. 95% of the hands in the room go up.
Wow.
Almost everyone knows someone that has struggled with drugs or alcohol. And those are usually good people that are trying and struggling and have made a mistake and might not have had access to resources or education. For the most part, drug use is a behavioral health issue. It shouldn't be a criminal justice issue, but drug use, just like mental health, even though the criminal justice system is not the best place to solve those issues, it's where a lot of those people end up and where a lot of those folks are funneled. And so we've done a lot of work pushing back on that to make sure that we're offering those folks other opportunities and second chances, and that the best interest of that person, but also the best interest of the community, is if we address whatever that root cause was, the drug use, the mental health issue. And if we're addressing that issue, the likelihood they're going to repeat that crime is a lot lower. And so recidivism goes down if we've put structure and support and education and knowledge in place where it was not before.
What does recidivism mean?
Recidivism means the repetition of a crime.
Got it.
So if someone's committed a crime and repeats a crime, that's recidivism.
Okay.
And so if we're lowering recidivism, we're really making a big impact in crime, because a lot of crime is recidivism. A lot of crime does end up being the same people doing the same things again and again.
Yeah.
On the high end of the scale, whether that's a violent crime or a serious crime, repeated things, that might mean that we need to look at jail, look at prison, look at more serious options. But in the lower end of that scale, and we see hundreds and hundreds of people that are coming into this office with just simple drug possession charges. My goal is to make sure that we're providing them the resources to combat that addiction.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of community partnerships.
Right.
And so, we don't do drug treatment in the DA's office, but we need community partners to send folks to drug treatment. And so we've worked with a lot of nonprofits. We work a lot with Summit Stone. We've worked a lot with the new Longview Behavioral Health Facility that the county has out there on South Taft. And I'm on a couple panels. I'm boards, I should say. The district attorney representative on our statewide opioid abatement board run by the Attorney General's office. And I'm the law enforcement representative on our local Larimer County opioid abatement board. And on that local board, we put $5.5 million in the last 2 years back out into Larimer County for treatment, education, harm reduction, because that's the way we're going to solve this problem, right? We're not going to be able to arrest our way out of the fentanyl epidemic.
Right.
And so making sure that, for instance, kids in school understand the dangers of fentanyl. When folks like you and I, and probably most people listen to the podcast, were growing up, someone might have handed us a beer or a joint, and it probably wasn't legal at that age, but it also probably wasn't going to kill us.
Right.
One fentanyl pill can absolutely and does kill people, especially someone like a kid that doesn't have the tolerance to that opioid that a frequent adult user may have. And we've seen that. One of the cases we've just, so to get in the next segment of that, the other thing we've done is create new laws, right? Talking about what's new in this job. I went down to the Capitol and along with some other folks, created a law called fentanyl overdose causing death, which allows us to prosecute the dealers distributing fentanyl, which is essentially a poison at this point. It is so lethal. Prosecute them for a homicide level crime because they are knowingly distributing and pushing a poison. And so this is, again, so different than previous iterations of this epidemic. And so we've prosecuted more of those cases in this office, the distribution causing death cases, than any other jurisdiction in Colorado, not because we have more overdoses here, but because we've put the resources into holding the worst actors in this crisis accountable, but also getting justice for the victims of this crisis. I've met with a lot of these families that have lost loved ones to overdose of fentanyl, and they could not believe that there were people, not just in my office, but these are broad law enforcement partnerships that we've built to investigate these cases, that folks are fighting for their loved ones. And it's a criminal justice system that used to just forget about overdose victims because people in criminal justice felt that those were addicts that didn't deserve the same level of investigation.
There's been this narrative out there, I think maybe more recently than in previous years, at least that I can recollect, where one side of the aisle is tougher on crime than the others. Maybe some people think, Democrats weaker on crime, Republicans tougher on crime. Nobody is seemingly talking about being smart on crime, which I think is where you are at. How would you explain that? I mean, there's a lot of tribalism out there, and there are these narratives. Where do they come from, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're living in a very polarized country. There's no question about that. But those sort of soundbite narratives are I think, a pretty unhelpful way to talk about the criminal justice system. The reality, right, is the vast majority of those 12,000 give or take cases that we prosecute every year are low-level cases. They're misdemeanor cases, they're first-time offenders, they're young adults, they're people that have struggled with something and have made a mistake, but want to right that mistake and have the resources to go on and contribute to the community. And, yes, on a lot of those low-level things, could we put someone in jail for 5 days, 10 days, 30 days? We could, but the reality is they're going to get then back out in 5 days, 10 days, 30 days with no resources to address whatever happened. And those people are coming right back out into our community. And so if I want to look at community safety for the next 5 days, well, then, yeah, putting everyone in jail makes sense. But I want to live in this community for the next 5 years, the next 50 years. And if we're looking long term, then we have to be smart by addressing those underlying causes of crime. There's, of course, a different section of people, those that are really victimizing folks, those that are criminal thinkers, those that have proven that they're not amenable to some of these other opportunities. And those folks we argue for significant sentences on. And that's a much smaller percentage of people. Those are, for instance, those people we just talked about killing folks with fentanyl. One of those cases was a 15-year-old kid in Loveland who was struggling with drug use, had been in and out of rehab. Parents thought he was clean, and an adult fentanyl dealer reached back out to him in Loveland and sold him fentanyl, knowing he was a 15-year-old kid, and killed him. That's not someone we're given a second chance to. That's someone we're sending to prison. But that's a small subset, really, of the cases that we see.
That's interesting. I think wherever someone is on, whatever side of the aisle they're on, they just people like to have quick opinions and things. Anyone that has either A, had a conversation with you, or B, like me, has had multiple conversations with you and knows you, would say, man, this guy's tough. I think that would be one of the first things that come to mind. But let's talk about some things some other people would say. We have some mutual acquaintances. Let me just grab my phone here. Adjectives to describe Gordon McLaughlin. And we're going to keep these anonymous. When I say some of these, you might be able to guess who some of these people are.
Yeah, I don't know who you've reached out to. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I can certainly guess one person, but I don't know about the rest.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to guess the other one because you don't know that he's a mutual friend of ours. So let's see some of these. Fair, dedicated, bright. That was from one person, and let's go to another. This was the word I had to Google that I mentioned earlier. My lack of vocabulary is really coming out strong today on the show. Erudite, if I'm saying that correctly. Erudite basically means very intellectual. Compassionate, values driven, willingness to take the long road if it's consistent with his values system. Innovative, always willing to address the root problems, not the symptoms. Very strong skier. Another person commented what a strong runner you are. You are in the local TNT running group, which I used to be, and I will be rejoining, but they mentioned to me that you hadn't been running for a while. You show up. There are now 60-ish people in this TNT running group, and just because of your intensity, you're now one of the fastest people in the group, and it blew his mind. He's not the kind of person that would just blow smoke, shower praise if it's not well deserved. So all of this to me kind of points to the themes that I'm seeing again and again are kind of intense, really hardworking, tough guy, competitive, all of these things. Where'd you get these traits?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a lot to think about there with all those words and questions. Yeah. Well, I'll first have to say I don't think I'm one of the fastest people in that group. So I appreciate that compliment. There's a lot of really fast folks in that group. I had a couple meniscus surgeries about 3 years ago, and 3 to 4 years ago. And those were a real setback. And then the hours that I put in this job don't make rehabbing very easy. So I have just gotten sort of back this summer into some semblance of shape, which feels really good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I am competitive out there, right? When other people are running fast, I want to keep up. There's no question about that.
Right.
So now, hopefully in future years, I'll have some more time to put the work in to catch up with some of those folks.
Right.
In terms of where I got some of this drive, yeah, I mean, I think it's from my family, from my parents. Mm-hmm. I mentioned my mom. My dad is certainly a real role model of mine. He was a professor at Cornell, and she's definitely a really smart, driven person. I think my parents always had high expectations of, our performance in school and life and as people. Mm-hmm. And so, I definitely think my sort of upbringing and I'm, lucky enough to have had strong influences and good influences from parents and family. And so, yeah, I'm definitely, I think it's probably one of my best and worst characteristics about sort of how driven I am to do anything I'm doing in life, whether that's compete on the track with friends or change policies and create a fairer justice system. Mm-hmm. If I'm working on an issue, I can't really get it out of my head.
What's fascinating to me too, when I look at that list of adjectives used to describe you, is they're all kind of following in this competitive, tough, hardworking, and that's clearly evident anyone that meets you even for 10 seconds. The one in there was empathy. He has a lot of empathy. And I think it's rare in leaders to find someone that is so far on the spectrum of, intense, hardworking, but also has empathy. And it makes me think of the story you told earlier about your grandparents. I mean, Mother Teresa is in there. I mean, that is quite the story, quite the experience. Probably their impact on you maybe contributes a lot to that empathy.
Yeah. Compassion is one of the, if not the biggest quality I wanted to bring to this prosecutor's office. Mm-hmm. I think compassion is really, really important in terms of A, treating folks fairly, and B, earning the trust of the community.
Right.
The hardest thing we have to do in this job is convince 12 jurors who are picked at random from the community to agree on a verdict beyond a reasonable doubt and unanimously. It's really difficult. We talked about how polarized the world feels sometimes, right? Anyone listening, imagine just going out into Old Town Square and finding 12 people and convincing them of one set of facts beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard in the law, and unanimously. It's damn hard. And if we don't have community trust, we're not going to be able to do that. And so we don't want the jurors coming in to trial tomorrow morning and thinking like, well, I don't know if I should trust this DA's office. So we have to go earn that trust. And a lot of that has to do with showing compassion to those in the community that are struggling, that need second chances, that have not had perhaps fair interactions with law enforcement or DAs in the past. Those are all very real problems that I think it's important to acknowledge. So we've gotten out in the community a lot to try to earn that trust and to try to understand where folks are in their everyday lives that aren't where folks are at in this bubble of the courthouse. So I think it's important to get out there. I do that a lot personally, but others in the office do as well. We had our first day of service a few months ago in the spring, and we're actually doing our next one in a couple weeks here in the fall.
What's that? Explain that.
So we went out as an office. I think there were about 40 of us. So probably about half the office went out to different nonprofit partners that sort of intersect in some way with criminal justice and went over to their turf and volunteered and got to know more about the organization, about the employees, about the people they serve. And so we had a team at Crossroads, which is our domestic violence advocacy organization of Fort Collins. We had a team at Homeward Alliance, which is the housing advocacy group, homeless advocacy group. I was with a team at the food bank over on their big location on, I think, was it Blue Mesa up there, North Fort Collins. And I'd volunteered there before at the food bank, but it had been a few years, and it was still an amazing reminder of the amount of need in this community. And what is a safe, affluent, vibrant community, there's still a lot of folks that don't have those privileges. And we were sorting potatoes. I felt like I sorted about every potato from the entire state of Idaho, and that was what they were giving out that day. So there's a lot of need, and those are folks that are coming in as defendants, coming in as victims, coming in as jurors. And we need to sort of understand what people's daily experiences are if we're going to be good public servants and compassionate public servants and earn that trust. And so I think that's really important from that trust aspect, but it's also just the right thing to do to exercise compassion. We are seeing folks, whether it's a victim or a defendant, usually on the worst day of their lives. We were talking off mic a little bit when you came in here about this building's intimidating. And intimidating for you, a professional person with no criminal justice nexus. If you're talking about, a victim of a sexual assault that's coming into this building and maybe facing their perpetrator in court, if you're talking about a defendant who might be facing time incarceration that might cause them to lose their job, lose their housing, not be able to support their family. These are huge, huge impacts on people's lives. And so it's really important to have compassion for everything that people come to us with.
Yeah, you're thinking about hospitality here, which is what I gathered from our conversation off mic when I was telling you about the experience kind of walking in here. And I think that's going so far above and beyond what someone in your position would normally even think to address. If you own a restaurant, you're thinking about hospitality. If you own a business, you're thinking about the customer experience. Generally, someone in your role isn't thinking about that, putting ourselves in the shoes of who's walking into the building on the worst day of their life. So I think it's very impressive and very notable that you're not only thinking about that, but you are taking specific actions to address that and have people feel comfortable and have that experience be as positive as it can be. And I want to congratulate you on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, hospitality is an interesting way to describe it. I mean, I agree. Public service is customer service, and the customers are those 370,000 people. The victims, the defendants, the jurors, the every member of the community. And so, yeah, we have to serve them. And so, you came in through the front, and we have people at our front desk answering calls and talking to people in person all day long. And we were trying to provide a lot of information to folks about, what the criminal justice system looks like and how we can serve, because it's an intimidating system for sure.
Yeah, I think hospitality is a word. I mean, it can mean very different things in very different circumstances, but even walking into this building, there's so much respect. I mean, the people who are running security at the front were incredibly respectful. And, from walking into the office here, just, smiling and nodding, just incredibly just pleasant. Yeah. So I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. And just want to congratulate you on that again. I think that is special. Let's talk about, because this is an intense job. This is nonstop. What do you do for fun? Let's let people get to know you a little bit. We know you run. We know you're fast. We also know now that you're humble, because I happen to know, I think you are one of the fastest people in that group. You're denying it. You're a good skier. You're athletic. You're, all these things. But what do you like to do? Maybe specifically in Fort Collins. I mean, we're sitting here in Old Town Fort Collins, one of the most thriving downtowns in the country. What do you like to do in this area, and maybe just for fun on the weekends?
Yeah, well, you mentioned some things which are the reason I love Fort Collins and Larimer County. Is that, to me, it's always been the best of both worlds. It's a big enough city that you have everything at your fingertips. Great music and good coffee shops and good meals. And I love to walk a few blocks to different coffee shops from here. I love this office location. But at the same time, if you drive 10 minutes west, you're running on the trails in Lori or Horsetooth. And I mean, those are absolutely drop dead gorgeous trails. And, they're right there out our back door. And
what's your go-to trail?
I think Timberline. So I like to run up to Timberline, sort of around the backside. If folks have ever run the Black Squirrel Half Marathon, it's the first leg of that Black Squirrel.
Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, for those listening, and there's so many trails. It's interesting. Like Gordon is saying, you don't necessarily even know the name of the trail you're on, but as you mentioned, just go up to Lori, go up to Lori State Park, go up to that area and just pay the $7 for a 1-day parking pass. I think if you pay $70, you can get a whole year pass.
I have the year.
Yeah, we do too.
Well, now with the Colorado driver's license, it opts you into the state parks pass.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can opt out.
Okay.
But it automatically opts you in for a state parks pass.
Why would you opt out?
Well, if you don't think you're going to ever go to the parks, I guess. But no, for me, I opt in, and I also have the county parks pass, so I can park at Horsetooth or Lori. But yeah, those are amazing. And then even closer to town, I mean, just the trails around, Maxwell or Dixon Reservoir.
Yeah.
They're amazing, amazing trails. And so I do a little bit of mountain biking and road biking. Those sort of are more time intensive than just getting a quick run in. Mm-hmm. So often these days I'm just reverting to a quick run. But yeah, it's a beautiful county in that regard. And, the county is so amazing too, right? Is we're sitting down here on the Front Range. But we go up to almost 14,000 feet in Larimer County. And, the county is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. And, if you go up to Cameron Pass, and you mentioned skiing, I haven't done it much these last couple of years just with my schedule, but yeah, I mean, the backcountry skiing opportunities up at Cameron Pass are a passion of mine when I have a little bit of time. And, you don't get that a lot of places.
Yeah. I think you do some backcountry skiing with a mutual friend of ours.
Right.
And yeah, that's some serious stuff. So that's a great Colorado hobby. And I hope you get a chance to do more of that soon. It sounds like it's been a few years. You've gotten back into the running and just went straight to the top. So I'm sure you'll do that with the skiing as well. Those are some great things. Favorite coffee shop? Where do you mentioned you like to walk to the coffee shops. What's your spot?
I go to Mugs on Olive a lot.
Good one.
Mugs on Olive is great, good vibe, and good food there as well. And then I also really like Fox Den.
On the port.
They're a no waste coffee shop, and so they you got to bring your own mug. And once in a while, I forget. But when I remember, I appreciate that mission that they're not wasting all that cardboard and plastic. So
yeah,
those are probably my two favorites. But we go to a lot. Butterfly is right across from the courthouse here, and so you find folks from our office at Butterfly pretty much nonstop. So I was over at Butterfly this morning. So
love it. These are all run by local people too.
Yeah,
local operators. What about lunch?
Lunch, I'm usually a eat lunch at my desk person. And so either I'll bring leftovers or I like to go over to Mountain Ave Market, the Fort Collins Co-op, some folks still call it. And they have some prepared stuff that's really good.
I didn't know that. No one's mentioned that in the show, the little co-op grocery store there. They have prepared sandwiches inside.
Really good prepared stuff.
All right. That sounds like a nice hidden gem.
Yep, that is. And it's just quick because you grab it and you go, which is my speed.
Oh, that's great. I mean, someone's coming to visit, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend. What's one thing that you have to do in Fort Collins if they're here for a weekend? What can you not let them leave without doing?
My parents are coming into town in a few weeks, and I know they will want to go to Rainbow for brunch.
Great spot.
I know that
It's off of Laurel, right?
Yeah.
Kind of adjacent to CSU campus.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. We're gonna. I guess this is more like a month from now. We're gonna go to a Rams game, a home game, and that stadium on campus is a real treat.
It's a blast.
Yeah, especially if you're sitting. We got some nosebleed tickets, but the beauty of the nosebleed seats in that stadium is if you're on the east side of the stadium, you're looking up at the mountains, nice. And that's really nice. And then we'll probably go get a beer at a brewery. So I'm a fan of Stodgy. I'm a fan of Odell. I'm a fan of Mythmaker. So probably one of those places.
Mythmaker, you're the second person to mention that one. Where's that located?
That's over off like Prospect and no, not Prospect. Like Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And
West Elizabeth, right?
Yeah, West Elizabeth.
It's like Elizabeth and Taft or something. Yeah, Elizabeth and Taft. So a little bit off the beaten trail in terms of where all the other breweries at. But yeah, Mythmaker is a great one to try if you're listening and want to check out one of the up and coming kind of maybe smaller breweries here. Stodgy has probably the best outdoor setting that, at least it's right up there. I mean, Odell is amazing. New Belgium's amazing, but Stodgy has been coming up on every single podcast so far.
Odell is absolutely amazing, but sometimes you want something a little off the tourist scene.
Yeah.
And so Stodgy's a good local place. And then we'll probably take a hike somewhere. So we'll probably go up to Lawyer Horsetooth and just walk around and look down at the city.
Yeah, Arthur's Rock, maybe that hike. That's kind of a challenging one, I guess. There's some others there that are
steep up to Arthur's, but
towards the end it gets really steep on Arthur's. Just a heads up to everybody. And if you're trying to take your dog with you, he better like to exercise. That one is a little bit longer. But yeah, Laura has some amazing hikes. I'll put some links in the show notes so people can see these areas where some of these trails are. These, Laurie Park, and we'll put some links to Horsetooth in there as well. So, what does the future look like for you? I mean, you're young, you're the DA, you got the whole world's in front of you here. I mean, I'm curious, like, what are some goals over the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years? Anything you want to share?
Yeah. There's as we talked about, there's always something new to be working on, in this job. And so a couple of the sort of things we have in the burner that we're going to make some progress on over the next few years. One is improving our data transparency project and how we're using that. We launched a public data dashboard a couple years ago. That's on our website, and it shares as much data about what we're doing in criminal justice as any DA's office in the country shares.
And shares it with the public.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. And so,
how do people find that?
It's just on our website. If you Google Larimer DA, our website will pop right up as the first result. And then if you click on statistics from our webpage, it'll take you to the data dashboard.
Okay.
And that's part of that trust, accountability. Making sure folks, we're not hiding the ball on people, like sort of has historically been true in criminal justice. And now the key is to start utilizing that more in our daily work. So we want to make more data-driven decisions. Criminal justice has usually sort of been hey, this is the way it's always been done business. Mm-hmm. That's not a good way to operate a business or government or anything. So now we're incorporating that data into our work. But we went from 0 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour with data. Mm-hmm. And so we're really just sort of on the nascent stages of incorporating that. And I'm really excited about the opportunities to come with things like reducing recidivism, saving taxpayer dollars by being more efficient, knowing that the outcomes that we're sentencing folks to work, actually. So there's a lot of possibility there. And then we're also launching a domestic violence unit right now, this month for the first time ever. Very popular model in a metro area, but we've never had anyone in this office focus specifically on domestic violence. We went to our county commissioners, we explained the need, and now we have an advocate, a prosecutor, and an investigator focusing specifically on domestic violence cases and looking at high-risk cases, and so that we are better supporting victims and that we're going to be more successful in prosecuting what are often pretty difficult crimes to prove at trial so that we can hold folks accountable. And then the investigator is also going to be doing something really novel, which is the law on the books in Colorado for decades has been that domestic violence offenders cannot possess or purchase firearms. And it turns out no one's ever been following up on that. Not DAs, not law enforcement, not judges, nobody. And so now we're starting to have that investigator actually follow up to say, hey, is this true if this person said they don't possess firearms? Or if they said they do, have they actually forfeited those firearms? And so it's not anything new, but it's enforcing a law on the books. That's a bipartisan law. A firearm in a domestic violence household makes it 5 times more likely a lethality will occur. So this is a real important community safety initiative. And so we're excited to be able to sort of make some movement on that and hopefully reduce violent domestic violence crimes. And we're also getting out in the community to talk about some of the other gun laws in Colorado. Colorado's passed a lot of really important gun safety measures in the last couple of years. One of them is extreme risk protection orders, which folks often refer to as a red flag law, that gets guns out of the hands of folks that are a danger to themselves or others. And there's due process. They go in front of a judge. But if a judge orders that, then that person's firearms can be removed for a period of time while they may just be in crisis. And that law got expanded to a really wide range of people that are able to file those, but people don't know about it. And so we're going to really use our voice as the district attorney's office to talk about some of these community safety issues like that, and hopefully build some coalitions around it.
That's really interesting. And, hearing this from you, and, I'm just thinking recently it was, brought to my attention as these things, are sometimes, this is 2-3 degrees removed, but, there was a domestic violence situation. And what I heard was that the person who was telling me the story followed up with, yes, and there's firearms in the home and that person has to turn them in within the next week. And so what you're telling me is that has not always been the case. When I heard that, it sounded very reasonable. And that's interesting that is a new development under.
Yeah. Well, again, the interesting thing is it's always been the case. It's just not been followed.
Gotcha. I gotcha.
And so this is a high gun ownership state, and, a shockingly few amount of people that were accused of domestic violence were admitting that they own firearms. Mm-hmm. So there's a real disconnect there. But then even the folks that were admitting they own firearms and needed to forfeit those, they weren't. Mm-hmm. They weren't doing it, and no one was following up. And so those guns were remaining in that household that, again, they were already prohibited from being in.
And now there are. I mean, if no one's following up on it, if no one's actually enforcing it, then it doesn't matter if it's there or not.
Right.
So under your leadership, it sounds like that's huge. That's something that is now being followed up on, and it's happening. I mean, I know in this situation, at least from what was passed on to me, that's exactly what happened. So kudos on that as well, Gordon. I think this has been insightful. This is all like really interesting things to see, and I'm excited to see how everything goes in the future. I mean, we're proud to live here, in Fort Collins. I know you're proud to be a part of this community. And how many DAs would even go on a podcast? By the way, like that's an interesting question. Probably not very many.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's historically been a profession where there wasn't a lot of communication with the community. Mm-hmm. But it's a elected office, and I'm a public servant, just like our council members or commissioners or whoever else that need to be engaged and both explaining to folks what I'm doing, like we're doing now, but also hearing from folks. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I try to get out in the community a lot and get a lot of feedback from folks.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. A few things I've gotten from this conversation are, one, you're innovative. I mean, you're implementing innovative things. You're working hard to make sure that, it goes from the idea stage to the implementation stage. And then that next phase of, well, is it working? Like you're very dedicated to that. You're very passionate about that. Is it working? And then there's almost this other stage that is so far above and beyond to me, which is, well, let's have some transparency. It's one thing for me to say it's working, for people in this office to say, look at what we're doing, but let's prove it. Let's have real-time data. Let's have that be fully transparent. And that's what you're doing with this data sharing initiative. And the public can see that. So these things that you're doing, that you're implementing, people can see if they're working. They can see how they're working. I think I just don't hear about these things happening other places. I think, in so many areas, it doesn't matter the profession. hey, here's how it's always been done. Don't go outside the box. It seems to me that you're pushing that in a really good way. So kudos on that. Congratulations on just implementing some of these things. And I'll look forward to seeing the future success of that. I know so many people are asking me questions who are looking to buy a home here, who are traveling here, like, the guy yesterday from Durango, or, the past 3 months, I think I've toured with 6 people from different states. They have all of these questions, and this is one of the things that they wonder about. How does the look, or how is the safety of our community? And I think people will listen to this and they'll really get a lot out of this and get informed and feel good about it, as I do. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you at TNT Running Club next week.
Next week, I already know that I'm presenting the Loveland City Council, because I go around and I do updates to all of our city councils and town boards all throughout Larimer and Jackson counties, which is an initiative I started last year, because it's just part of that community engagement and letting folks know what we're doing. And then I, of course, get a lot of feedback, because those council members are really, in touch with on the ground stuff in their different towns. So, folks forget, we have Johnstown, we have Windsor, we have Wellington, we have Berthoud. There's a lot of little towns. So I get around all those, and next week is my update to Loveland. So I will not be at the track workout. You
have better excuses than most, I think, when you can't make it. You do have a lot to do. The week after, maybe the week out, in the coming weeks
I
here.
Hope to see you there in the coming
TNT
weeks.
Is year round.
It
it's
is,
in the winter months. That's one thing I remember from being in it before. We're going to be out there running when it's 0 degrees outside. So I'll look forward to seeing you there. I hope you're going to get back into skiing this next winter season. And I know we'll keep in touch, but thank you for sharing all of this with me, with the community, your time. I know there's probably people outside this door right now that are just lining up to give you things to do or give you updates.
That's likely true. Yes.
That is the position you're in, and we appreciate it. So thank you, Gordon.